The US Army recently announced a sweeping reorganization to its troops. A lot of units are being inactivated, and when a lot of units are inactivated, people on the internet talk about it. There are two major contexts behind the changes. First, Army 2030. The US Army is trying to reorganize for large-scale combat operations and need more people in different types of units. Second, there are big manpower issues. Pre-existing units are largely under strength, having been designed during a different time but manned under current circumstances. As for changes that impact the Light Infantry Brigade or Infantry BCT, here are the big ones. First, they're inactivating Cavalry Squadrons in CONUS Infantry and Striker Brigade combat teams. This was actually something we knew was going to happen in the Infantry BCTs at least. Ultimately, the recon goal is a Divisional Cavalry Squadron or Div-Cav. The 1st Cavalry's Div-Cav pilot is currently under the Aviation Brigade like in the old days. Brigades would have a recon troop or company, while maneuver battalions retain a scout platoon. This is how things were before modular force in the mid-2000s, which created permanent brigade combat teams. Shutting down the Brigade Cav Squadron, which has an HQ, 2 mounted and 1 dismounted troop, is going to resource the creation of the Division Cav Squadrons, 1 M10 Booker Company per IBCT under a divisional battalion, and the Brigade Recon Troop. The Booker Battalion HQ is planned to be resourced via a troop from a shut-down Armored Brigade Cav Squadron. However, as far as I know, they aren't implementing the Brigade Recon Troop or Div-Cav before they case the Cav Squadron's colors. Although I could be wrong about that. Some brigades might try to retain the Cav Squadron's dismounted Charlie Troop. Second big change, the Army is getting rid of the Light Infantry Battalion's Delta Company, the Weapons Company. These are basically motorized direct fire support units equipped with TOW missiles, 50 cals, Mark 19 automatic grenade launchers, and M240s. Unlike the light infantry companies, they're organically motorized and bring a lot of firepower. They're going to be replaced by an anti-armor platoon under the Battalion HQ company. This will be about a quarter of the size of the weapons company, and instead of being mounted on heavily armed Humvees, it's possible they'll be mounted on infantry squad vehicles and equipped mainly with Javelin ATGMs and the M3 MAWs. The Army wants to streamline the motor pools of its light infantry battalions around the ISV, although for units that have not fielded the ISV, I'm guessing XS Humvees could be an option as well, but that's just a guess. To give some context, Airborne, Air Assault, and Reserve Component H-Series Leg Infantry battalions have had a dedicated anti-armor company with 20 Jeep-mounted TOW missiles since the 80s. And before that, there was a Combat Support Company which had 12 to 18 TOWs or fewer 106mm recoilless rifles depending on the exact time period. In the 90s, after the Humvee came in, Mark 19s and 50 cals were added to that company's arsenal. But Army of Excellence Light battalions in the 80s and 90s lacked this company and instead had an anti-armor platoon like in today's proposed org. But this platoon was intended to have 4 TOW Humvees rather than man-portable ATGMs. While fewer TOWs improved strategic mobility and made manpower savings, the 4 TOW platoon was considered by many to be inadequate against an even modest armor threat. Active duty light divisions included the 6th, 7th, and 25th Infantry, plus the 10th Mountain. The former 3 were aligned to the Pacific, while 10th Mountain was earmarked for Norway. And then the Virginia and Maryland National Guard's 29th Infantry was the only reserve component light division. It just so happened that the Secretary of the Army of the time had been a lieutenant colonel in the Virginia National Guard. For a mechanized war, the Army intended to reinforce some of its light divisions with TOW light anti-tank battalions with 60 TOW Humvees manned by the National Guard, although these were inactivated in 1992 due to post-Cold War cuts. Suffice it to say, the Light Infantry Division was controversial at the time. Weapons companies were added back into the light infantry battalions in the 2000s with the modular force reform, but with a lot less TOWs than the old anti-armor companies. By comparison, the tentative task org someone recently posted on Instagram suggests the new anti-armor platoon will consist of 4 teams, each with 2 Javelin Clues and 1 Carl Gustav. But it looks like a team would only be able to employ 1, maybe 2 systems at once if at full strength. Basically, each team is equivalent in anti-tank capability to the Light Infantry Rifle Platoon's weapons squad. However, especially since to my knowledge the ISV fielding isn't that far along, they could just go with the existing Assault Platoon design. The manning levels are the same and the Humvees are on hand. To be sure, this is a big decrease in anti-tank and direct fire capability, going from 8 TOW missiles, Mark 19s, M240s, and 50 cals, to 4 or 8 shoulder-launched dismounted AT weapons, or 2 TOWs depending on the direction they go with it. Although there is probably debate as to the trade-offs between lower range, kill probability, and no other direct fire support capabilities, versus lower manning, meaning more manning for other things, fewer logistical requirements, and a smaller footprint for airlift. It's also openly discussed that battalions often misemploy weapons companies anyway. Brigade support battalions aren't MTO'd a large number of convoy escort platforms, so the weapons company is commonly used to guard logistics convoys or even the battalion HQ. Still, one can't help but think of this change as not particularly conducive to fighting a mechanized enemy, i.e. most of our potential enemies. But the rifle company is the infantry battalion's #1 thing, and prioritizing support over the #1 thing would probably not be the best move either. As an aside, I would not expect the planned M10 Booker companies to be a like-for-like replacement. The basic scale of issue is intended to be a company per brigade, which could theoretically mean a platoon per infantry battalion. But that's if the brigade and division commanders aren't retaining MPF companies for other duties, like counter-reconnaissance, a mobile reserve, or to form the base of a company team or maneuver battalion task force. Ultimately, they won't be the battalion commander's toys to play with unless they're passed down 2 echelons, which to be fair is likely since direct support of rifle companies is meant to be their #1 thing. But SOPs haven't been developed yet, and it's not exactly the same use case as a TOW. The Booker is meant to be an assault gun, not a primary anti-tank platform. Also within the battalion, there seems to be some movement on the integration of unmanned combat vehicles. Nothing super detailed, but I'm told that they're going to start rolling out a specialty platoon for autonomous systems, similar subordination-wise to a battalion scout or anti-tank platoon. This was actually talked about 2 years ago. At that time, they were calling it a cross-domain platoon. Now, they're calling it the Robotics and Autonomous Systems Platoon, who are responsible for HMI or human-machine integration within the battalion. 129 Infantry and the 508th Parachute Infantry have been testing the concept, most recently at Project Convergence Capstone 4. This basically centralizes all the complex unmanned systems in the battalion to quicken their rollout into the TO&E. I'm guessing it's easier to train, sustain, and account for a centralized platoon than deal with the mess of teams and robots spread around the companies. And it provides the opportunity to have higher-ranking subject matter expert NCOs and an officer with oversight over their employment and training. Larger systems they're expecting to operate, like the ground-based RCVL, the SMET Robo-Mule, and larger fixed and rotary-wing drones like the Ghost X, would also be burdensome to a rifle company. It frees up infantry in the rifle platoons to operate smaller drones that make more sense dispersed. But I'm told the UAS the specialized platoon would operate won't require an improved runway, so they can notionally go anywhere a rifle company can. The unmanned ground vehicles won't be the exact same capability as the late weapons company, but some of them can mount stuff like 50 cals, M240s, and javelins, so they could mitigate some aspects of that inactivation as far as direct fire support for rifle companies. I doubt they'll be as capable in terms of combat power, but they will allow first contact with the enemy to be made by a robot rather than a human, which limits risk to soldiers' lives. And in this case, that drone could have heavy direct fire weapons aboard. Taking a detour from the recent announcements, the 82nd Airborne has also applied some other Army 2030 initiatives, such as the centralization of the Brigade Field Artillery Battalions under their Division Artillery. These are still battalions in direct support of the brigades and under their footprint, but being under the DIVARTY means they can be weighted at the division level to support the main effort brigades. No artillery in reserve and all that. Also, the 82nd has taken the brigade support battalions, the direct support logistics battalions, out of the BCTs and centralized them under the division sustainment brigade. This is essentially how things were with the old school Division Support Command or DISCOM before the mid-2000s. Once the Cav and engineers are gone, the 82nd will basically just have brigades, not BCTs. However, I haven't heard of any other division doing those two things yet, so whether it's an 82nd only thing or they're just the pilot for the concept before it's generally adopted, I'm not sure. Speaking of engineers, the Brigade Engineer Battalions are going away too. BEBs currently have an HHC, 2 Combat Engineer Companies, Signal Company, Military Intelligence Company, and an attached Forward Support Company for logistics. They're more of a special troops battalion than pure engineers, which causes its own problems. However, engineering assets are going to be shifted to the division level. The engineer force structure will basically go from 43 tactical battalions to 25 tactical battalions. That'd be 21 divisional engineer battalions and 4 battalions at higher echelons. I'm told starting in fiscal year 2025, the BEB headquarters and headquarters companies will be inactivated. Its Seaburn Recon Platoon will also be transferred to the Brigade HHC. The 2 engineer companies will be combined into super companies, which will carry on the lineage of their original BEB, and they'll be moved to a division engineer battalion but maintain a direct support relationship with their original brigade. My understanding is light brigades may retain the signal companies in support, possibly grouped under the Brigade Support Battalion or as a direct report. The military intelligence companies are a bit more tricky and I don't have a definitive answer for that, but the rumor I'm hearing is that they'll eventually be moved from the brigade to the division. My guess is that it could be in preparation for creating an intelligence and electronic warfare battalion in direct support of the division, but don't quote me on that. Armored divisions will have more engineers than light divisions, up to a whole brigade for the reinforced division structure. Check out my old video on the penetration division, which has since been renamed to Armored Division Reinforced. Some things have changed, but it goes over the broad strokes of Army 2030. I'll see you over there.